What makes Pokemon cards so desirable? I mean, you would think it's probably the rare cards or maybe their value, but is that all there really is to it? I mean, we can now see other competitors trying to dabble within the trading cards, yet none can stand toe to toe with Pokemon. So Pokemon cards have truly reached some level of like an iconic status through pop culture. Now, there are some other unique qualities about Pokemon cards, and I'm going to explain that in just a moment. But guys, I cannot believe I'm celebrating 2,000 subscribers, and I think a gift for you guys is well overdue. Man, honestly, it's been a wild journey, and it only felt like yesterday that I made my first video and I had no idea what would happen. And you know, guys, it's actually been kind of life-changing in the sense that, I mean, I know a lot of people wouldn't even consider 2,000 a lot of subscribers, and to a lot of people it's a low number, but to me, working towards a goal and sharing my hobbies with an audience has really shifted my own outlook on life. And it's also shown some growth and development in areas that I didn't expect. You know, being a dad is hard, and it's hard to find time for yourself because your kids always come first. And as a parent, we often neglect our own desires because we pour so much of our love, time, and commitment into our kids. And one of the mistakes I've made along the journey is that I didn't look after myself at all, and I focused a lot on others. And guys, man, like last year, I was in a very dark place. I was sitting at 110 kilos, and dude, I was just depressed, and I was feeling absolutely defeated with my life. Like, I'm so lucky that my amazing fiance, Chanel, she actually really pushed me to work on myself and for my family. And then I started taking things really seriously, and I dropped over 25 kilos. It was honestly a huge journey that took a lot out of me, but it did so much for my mental health, and it was just so transformative. I did it not just for myself, but I did it for my partner and for my daughter. You know, guys, right now as I'm speaking to you, I'm sitting at 85 kilos, and I'm about 6'1", so for my height and the weight I am, I'm feeling really good. So I'm really proud of, what I've achieved. But man, without Chanel, I wouldn't have been able to do any of this. She has been just pushing me to share my story and my hobbies with the world. And honestly, I'd have no idea where I'd be without her. So, as much as this has been a healthy change, I've just been so glad to be able to express a real passion of mine to an audience, and I couldn't be more grateful. And a big shout out to you guys, because you guys have been also incredible as well. And I'd really like to pay it forward, because I do believe we live in a benevolent universe. So guys, today I am gifting this incredible PSA 10 Japanese Pikachu pre-order promo. Now, this card was only available when pre-ordering Scarlet and Violet in Japan back in 2022, and honestly, it just looks fantastic. This being a PSA 10 definitely helps its value, and guys, in order to be selected, I'd honestly love for you to comment and tell me what your favorite Pokemon card of all time is. And also, share a time in your life that you achieved something that you once thought was impossible. In order to be selected, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and you have liked the video. This channel has honestly been one of those moments for me, and I'd love to know yours. I'll read through the comments over the next few weeks, and I'll make sure to pin the comment to whoever gets selected. But when I think of Pokemon cards in general, they have just broken the paradigm for what's possible with collectibles. And we can see all these other competitors trying to jump in, and they're just trying to get a piece of the action. But there's something specifically that Pokemon do that even the biggest competitors in the world, like Disney, cannot replicate. And even if they do gain some success, the real question comes, can they hold the game down for 20 years? The longevity of Pokemon is a feat on its own. But you know what, guys? It hasn't always been smooth sailing for them. And that's why when I think of collecting Pokemon cards, there is some specific cards that spring to mind that every serious collector should consider owning, or maybe even set a goal to try grab one within their own collections. Now, some of these cards are chosen because they are part of pop culture history, and others because they've elevated the hobby to new heights. So starting at number 5, it is Shining Gyarados. Now this, along with Magikarp, were the first shiny cards to ever be released, and they made an impact. Not only that, but Red Gyarados was such an iconic Pokemon, and it was such a unique introduction to shiny Pokemon within the games. The love for shiny Pokemon also spilled into the TCG, and a lot of fans couldn't get enough of shiny Pokemon. Now, the Gyarados takes it over the Magikarp because of the connection to the Johto video games. Red Gyarados is such an iconic Pokemon within the game's history, and its TCG's inaugural release was one that is hard to top. I mean, firstly, the card's design is out of this world, but more than that, it's a piece of history for Pokemon. Even today, you have people who will soft reset a game 10,000 or more times to try catch a shiny Pokemon. Shiny Pokemon have become a staple within Pokemon, and this card is part of history. Now, obviously the first edition PSA 10 is valued at an absurd amount of money. I mean, you're looking at like 6,000 to 7,000 USD for one of these. However, a non-first edition in PSA 8 or 9 is probably more achievable to add to your collection. I mean, guys, like with all vintage cards, I don't really recommend buying raw because it's a gamble, right? I mean, photos can't show all the issues. People can hide issues, but you know, when I'm thinking of a PSA 8 or 9, this is a really great card to have in a collection and it does hold its value. Now, I did mention in an earlier video that cards should be PSA 10 for investing. However, that is far more for modern cards because for vintage, it would get way too expensive. But guys, this card is a piece of history that deserves a spot in any collection. Now, moving on to number 4, it is Ancient Mew from the Pokemon movie. Now, this one is such a great card and one that is so iconic for the time when it was released. It's a true masterpiece of a card artwork and one that is highly loved by collectors and fans all across the world. It is a very cool card, but it also is a part of Pokemon's history with the release of the movie. And guys, a good news about this card is, compared to other vintage cards, this card's not even that crazy expensive. And it still holds really decent value. So it's a great card which really shows off the mythical nature of Mew, and it's well known by old and new collectors. This is definitely one for any collection, and a PSA 10 isn't even that out of reach. In the right market and in the right buying cycle, you could pick this up for $400 in PSA 10, which is pretty good considered it's a very old card. Now, number 3 isn't a specific card, but it is Gold Star Pokemon cards. Now, for this one, I'm not actually focusing on individual Gold Star cards because they are all independently incredible for the Pokemon trading card game. Just so you know, some of the prices for these are ridiculous, and I mean, they are proper crazy, but having any of these in your collection is great as they are iconic cards. Having some of these in your collection is well worth it just for the flex, but then again, the prices for high grades can probably make your eyes tear up. Though it has to be said, they are a cornerstone of Pokemon's trading card game history, and they are loved by millions of collectors across the world. Rayquaza is my favorite by a long shot. If you did want to collect these, I'd try score some of these graded if you can, just because it would at least be protected in a case, which is better than raw in my opinion. But unless you are rolling in money, probably miss out on the high grades for these cards. Now, number 2 is Umbreon VMAX Alt. Yes, this card is a must. It is the card that revived Pokemon, and we don't know if we will see a card like this for the next decade. It literally shaked the world up, and it is the sole reason why Evolving Skies booster boxes are close to 7 times for what they retailed for. This card made Pokemon be loved again and made so much noise in the community. I mean, I do admit it is expensive and I definitely think it's an overvalued card, but none of that really takes away from its status. Now, one thing that a lot of people never give this card credit for is the quality control of it. It does have a very high pop report, but the quality control on this Umbreon was sensational. It's actually very likely if you submit this card to grade that it will come back a 10. In fact, if this card is pulled pack fresh, you're more likely to get a 10 than anything else, which isn't always the case when it comes to grading. I mean, sometimes a PSA 10 can be under 30% chance pack fresh, so it's great to see good quality control on this card. Now, one thing about this card that a few collectors worry about is that it seems that a lot of collectors who own Umbreon VMAX usually have multiple, so it is a card that a lot of people try collect multiple copies of. But nonetheless, it is a piece of modern Pokemon history, and it is one of my favorite cards to ever be released. Now guys, number 1 goes to none other than base set Charizard. Yes, this is the king of Pokemon cards. This amazing card could be hanged in a museum for just how much it changed trading card collectibles. And I think it's not an overstatement to say that we will most likely never see a card of this impact again. Though, never say never. Not only did this card change Pokemon cards, but it is a symbol of pop culture and a part of history. Though this card has been exhausted with so many remakes and renditions of the card, but there is honestly nothing like having the original 1999 version in your collection. Now, the first edition and shadowless copies are very expensive, and while they would be awesome to have in a collection, 99% of the population won't be able to fork out the money for a good quality copy. Though I don't think having a non-first edition is bad at all, and it's still an amazing card to have in your collection, and a PSA 8 is an attainable goal, and it's definitely one to keep in a collection. You know, some people say this card is overrated, but I think they sometimes overlook the fact of the impact this card had. I feel calling it overrated is a little unfair to its legacy, as it changed collecting forever. Though there are a lot of underrated cards at the moment, which could one day become iconic given the right circumstances. What are some underrated cards at the moment? Well, the answer to that question is packaged inside this video right here. In this video, I look over some of the current cards which are reasonably affordable and have the potential to skyrocket under the right circumstances. Click that video, guys, and I'll see you there.